Before we go forward, I need to do some code refactoring and talk about some really important things that we may not cover in future, and they didn't have their own dedicated category to make a separate video for them. Stay tuned to the end of the video because we will cover different miscellaneous concepts and adjust our code and do some refactoring, very important refactoring all over the place. Hello everyone, this is Ali Reza. Welcome to the Mentor Code Lab. As I showed in the previous video, when I was following Tutti Vorti's repository, I saw that he was using generics. And it was interesting because I didn't see anyone using generics to register items. I did add some to-dos inside different sections of the code that needs to be talked about in this video. The very first one is this generic implementation. If you remember, our code was like this: private static item, register item with a string name and item. This is the generic version. T extends item, we return the T type, and we accept T as the parameter as an input. I was confused if it was a good approach or not, so I went into the Discord channel and asked people. I took a screenshot because I think it's a really good answer that two people had gave. Matthew Dragon said that if your block is a type of my block, your field would still have to be block. In our case, as you see, each time we are registering something, we are registering it as item. That's what he's saying. If you use inline registration with the first function, means the non-generic version. The second function, the generic one, allows the field to be the same type that the block really is. What does it mean? Armors, for example. Here we see that we are instantiating an armor item. So with generic, instead of using item, here we can use armor item. And that's okay because we are using generics. And that's what he's meaning, that it can be the same type. However, he goes forward and says, then the question is, if the field should be of a subclass like armor item, or just the class, the parent class like item or block. The former means the subclass can sometimes be useful, but usually the later is better, means that we should use block or item. And he explains why. He says it has better compatibility. If you change the block class or others change the block class, other mods are reading the field block and you should read the field block. It means that if I go and make the type armor item, of course, armor item is extending the item. So if someone is changing something critical in the item, that armor item is overwriting or things like that, we get into a problem because that injected code by Mixin, for example, may be neglected now. So if I return item here, I make sure that I have 100% compatibility with any other mod out there that may tweak the item class. If something happens, for example, in future, if someone comes and tells me that I put your mod and this second mod together in a mod pack and I get this issue, now I can identify if my code needs to change to make it compatible or if the second mod is responsible and it should change. However, if I use armor item here, there can be two different scenarios. The first scenario is that I still get the issue and now I need to backtrack it to the item and make sure that it's related to the item itself and then follow the same process. So it's an extra step for me, or chances are that I may not see any issue because my method is overriding that change from the item class. As general, as Hisui says, personally, I always just have a static block, in our case, a static item, and store all my blocks as block or items as item. I have yet to encounter any issues from doing it that way. Also, additionally, I add this. I have to encounter any benefit of using subclasses instead of item or block. I mean, if I use armor item here instead of item, I still didn't see any benefit in any part of the code in any mod, other than maybe you get easier reading of the same line. Although if you put good naming for your fields, then that's not a problem there. So, in my opinion, and referring to people in Discord channel, this is not a good way of handling things, and we shouldn't use generics here. So we go back into our way of using the item. Same thing is happening for the block class. So if I find my mod blocks and scroll down, I see that I added this generic, and honestly, we still prefer to use the old way of assigning the registry. So that's that. However, here I have an extra to do to talk about. And by the way, we don't have this T, so we don't need this typecast anymore. And again, we are using non-generic versions, so get rid of the generics. And now here is something that I noticed, and it's a warning here that says you are not using this return type. Do you want to use void? If we take a look, it's referring to this block item. Each time we are registering a block, we are registering a block item associated to it. And of course, we are not really using this. So I think there is no harm in returning void here and get rid of that warning. Of course, now we don't need to return anything. So we just register our block item. That's two of the problems that I wanted to address. It was not related to my code, but because I know TutiWort is adding tutorials and some live shows on YouTube, I wanted to address the generic usage because you may watch them and becomes a question for you. However, Matty says something extra. It says, I personally prefer not registering at the field at all. This avoids too early registration if something loads the class. Instead, I just create the block or item in the field in it and register it in a static method I call from main. Now, what is he talking about? What we have here is called inline initialization. When we are defining our variable, we immediately initialize it with a value. And he's right, in most cases, this is a potential for problems in future. If you do this on something like Terraformer Wood to create your boats, you will find that boats will not behave correctly. And that's a prime example on places that early initialization can harm your code because what you're doing is calling this initialization when the class is being created in memory. And sometimes this can cause something similar to race issues when you are multi-threading. It's not a race issue, but it's similar concept. Basically, something is trying to access your variables when they are not ready. So in general, when you have a method call that is static for registering, it's better to register everything in here. In other words, now we have to do a big refactoring. And that is to take everything from here all the way to the end. Of course, I have some commented sections, but that's okay. Copy them, come into this register method, and get ready. We will paste it. However, now we have tons of errors. It's easy fix, don't worry. We just need to remove everything before the name of the variable, like so. Also, we have another error. In top, we define them as final. So we remove the final from here, and we remove the initialization here. Basically, now we are just defining the attribute, and when we are calling the register method below, we are assigning the value. This is the correct way of doing things. So I will pause the video and finish the whole thing inside mod blocks, and we will come back. Okay, took 5 minutes, and something that you may notice, I used the comma and a space between different block registrations. Of course, I could put a comma here and remove this section like this, but I prefer to keep everything that are related to each other, at least concept-wise, inside a single line. For example, these are my gem blocks, these are the raw gem blocks, these are special blocks, stairs, slabs, buttons, pressure plates, etc. These are ores, so the deep ore, the end ore, nether, overboard, and finally one special ore that I have. And then the goo blocks that we will talk about them later, and some machines. Of course, my machines are just commented, so I didn't add them one after another because as we go forward, I will uncomment one, add it to the previous line, and we will move forward. And our register method is now registering everything, and the regions that we had are here. So I can just close this region and get a neat and compact register method call if I so want to. Now, I have to do this whole process again for the items. I'm not gonna do it in front of monitor because items are a little bit too much. If blocks took 5 minutes, this can take 15 minutes, half an hour, and honestly, doing it in front of the camera is boring. So I will just remove this and I will keep a to-do on top that says handle inline initialization, and I will do it between the episodes. Of course, you see lots of to-dos for adding recipes. These are for myself. Some of these will have blasting recipes, some of these will have shaped or shapeless recipes. This is the mechanics of my own game, so it has nothing to do with the tutorials. However, I want to talk about a few more stuff. One, this comment will remain inside the item registration at the very end. This is how you will add one item into the vanilla creative tabs. For example, we are adding it into building blocks. I'm not using it, but I will keep it there because at the end of the line, I want to convert this finished mod back to new version of my template mod. And at that time, keeping these comments here will help me because if I want to, I can utilize it by just removing the comments. And at the end of each mod, if I didn't use these commented ones, I can delete them. Let's talk about this one, adding some overloads. If you take a look at my item registration, other than few items like, I don't know, the armor ones or sword and other tools, most of the items are just simple items. I mean, for example, reinforced plates. All of them are registering a new item. Plates are registering a new item. And I want to be a little bit lazy, so I can have a new override for this register item. Also, register item, let's be consistent. I will call it register. Take note, I have a register method that is public. Now I have a method that is private and is called register. However, these won't conflict because the second register method has parameters and the system is smart enough to understand which one you are calling. And as you see, I don't get any errors. By the way, if you see these curly lines under the names, these are not errors. My errors are made with these bold lines. For example, if I remove this item type from here, you will see that I have a thick red line under the words. That is when I have an error. The curly lines, whatever they are named, are just my own coloring template, coloring style to understand what is going on. For example, I know that this color with curly line means method definition. Or for example, if you notice under any static field, I have a curvy line with yellow color, I'm doing a static method call. These are just the code styles. If you want to see any errors, look for thick red lines or red lines on the scroll bar. Okay, let's add some overloads for our methods. So I will have a private static that returns item and we call it register. However, this one only accepts a string name and nothing else. So this time, instead of repeating this register method, I will call myself register with the name, comma. Now I just need a new item. I will open any one of these and I will get this method call, new item. And I will just paste it here and that's it. And I will return this overload call. Now, why do I have a problem here? Private method is never used. That's okay. That's okay. We will call it. And now, every time I'm doing something like this, I can simply remove this whole section and this will be smaller. Now, I will add few overloads here that I will not use myself, but I want to keep them because, as I said, I will generate a temp mod from the finished product and I want to utilize them. I can say private static that returns item register, and here I will produce name. I will produce item.settings and I will call it settings. And this time I will call myself, so return register with the name new item with the settings. And this time I can utilize it and remove this section. And basically I'm calling this method. This method will call this one and this one will call this one. Now, this is not optimized. You can argue with me on that. However, remember, this is just being called at mod initialization at load time. And as much as I understand, it happens only once. And that's why I'm okay with it. If you are not okay with it, well, of course, you can just call this registry.register over and over and just, replace things. For example, you can say, here we're just producing the name. So in here, we want a new item with item dot settings. And here we want a new one. Okay. And again, here we can call ourselves, and instead of these new settings, we are utilizing the setting. So these are overloads that we can have. And now we are not repetitively calling ourselves, and this is as optimized as it can get. This gives us a little bit of flexibility here and there when we need it, and we can handle it. Same overloads can be done here. For example, for our blocks, we are registering a name and a block. However, in many cases, we are just making this new block, and we can have an override, private static, that returns a block, and we call it register. By the way, let's refactor this guy to be a register. There we have it. And this one will have a string name only. However, before I move forward, I want to have this Boolean that says has item. The reason is that we may have a block that will not produce a block item for itself for whatever reason. And we say if has item, then register the item. So in this scenario, for example, we are registering with the name and has item, and we are just calling the block. But remember here, we are saying that instead of the block, say block equals to new block with abstract block dot settings. But here I'm not producing anything to copy. So instead we say create. And now we can register that block has item should be a Boolean. Now another overload of these that doesn't have the item Boolean. And here we assume that we already want the item block. And here I will add a new instance of these. But here I will call them register block. And this is why I refactored the name before attacking this overload system. And registering a block means that we don't need any item block for it. So right now I have a register with block that has item block. And honestly, I can call myself here. That's a better one here because we will have too many overloads. As I said, I'm okay with overloads that call few method calls at register time. So here we say register with the name and the new block and has item. That will call this method and we will return. This one that has a name and a block, but what I have in mind here is to call ourselves with the name, with the block, and true. So basically, this is an overload that assumes that we want the item block, and we should return. So return register with the name, with the new block with abstract block dot settings dot create. And finally, we want the block item. And why are you not happy? Because I have capital L. Register block is returning the register method. Now we have the name, we have the block. However, in this case, we don't need any block item associated to this block. I have one or two blocks that are like this. So return register, calling the name, getting this one from here to here, and finally calling it false. That's another overload. Finally, I can give another way of a copy. For example, we say private static void register copy. And here we say string name, a block, and has a Boolean has item. This way, I am just doing this return register with the name with new block of abstract block dot settings dot copy of the block that I sent in, and finally has item. And why are you not happy? Because I said void. And final one, private static block register block copy with the name and the block, and we use return register with the name new abstract block dot settings dot copy. I forgot something here. New block. Yes, that's the thing with the block that we sent in. However, we don't want any block item associated to this. And I think I missed a parenthesis here. There we go. So these are the overloads. Basically, now I can register a simple block with the item, and I can handle if it should have an item, block item or not, or I can register an item with no block item associated to it. I can have register a block simple as having a block with block item without sending in the true or false. And the same thing that happens just for the block without the, well, wait a minute, register name with a block, new abstract block with true. This is assuming that we have a block item, yes. And then we have the counterparts for the block without block item. So this one has item. Okay, this is true, true. Now, anything that doesn't have the block item, I will add the block name. Finally, I can copy a block with block item or without block item. So I will have this one that doesn't provide any Boolean, and we assume that we are asking for a block item. So I just gave myself lots of flexibility in future. Also, I can use a block item, a custom block item. And for that, I know that I will have a block item, so I will just copy these two, register block, comma, block item. I'm dedicatedly asking for a block item here. And here I'm asking for a block item because I changed the second parameter to block item here. This method call, string and a block item, will not conflict with this one that has name and block because I'm using a subclass, dedicated subclass here. If we have any problem in this case in the future, we have to sit back and think about something. However, now I need to add the registries myself, I think. It's a better approach now because if I'm using a block item, at least I need to have this part on top. And instead of new block item, I'm registering with the block item in both cases and then returning the block itself. Now, this will become handy when I have one or two, especially one block that I want to have my own block item type as an extension of the block item, and I want to handle the draw page of that item and putting the item in the Word manually because that's a very special item and we will talk about it in future. And these two methods, at least one of these, will come handy. And by the way, I shouldn't call these registers. I just need this one because I'm handling the block item myself, so I shouldn't call the upward ones. And here we don't have a block, so we want this. And instead of block, we will have a create. Now for the, do I want an overload that doesn't accept an, yeah, why not a block copy? Why not? As I said, tons of these will not be used by myself, but why not? Register copy. So in here, I need, actually, yes, I'm producing a block as a copy. So I just have one, not two. And here we are making an abstract class dot copy of the block that we sent in. That's the last section. Okay, so we had tons of overloads, and this will make myself a lot more lazy compared to before. And this region is about helper methods, and register is not a helper method. So I will take it out. I will put it there. And I think I had done the same thing here. No, yeah, it's out of the helper method. So the overloads are hidden, but we can use it. And I did tweak the code refactor. So now that I see that I'm making a copy instead of this register, for example, I can say register, and I see my overloads right now. So I will get the name, but instead of a register, I want to register a copy with this name and the blocks dot amethyst block. And just like that, now I have my own block. In my opinion, it's a little bit laziness here and there. Why not? So I can say just register copy, and you see that this whole section of code can go away, and it's much cleaner, less parentheses, less headaches, means that I can make sure that now I will never ever have to deal with these registries in future if anything happened in Minecraft. And in that case, I can just focus on my helper methods, fix things down here, and everything in the method will work without me needing to come back and tweak every single one of these. Because if you recall, in 1.20.4, we were instantiating a new settings, a new fabric settings, something like that. And things changed inside Minecraft, and it became abstract block.settings and item.settings. And I had to go through all these registries and change every single one of them. But now using these overloads, I just need to fix few methods down here, or maybe one of them, who knows, anywhere that I'm using abstract settings, for example, or at any time if anything critical happen, I don't have to sit back and scratch my head. Okay, what was this? What was that? I will just have to deal with these sections down here. And honestly, it is much faster maintenance, in my opinion, at least. So between the episodes, I will come back and do the refactoring to do use overloads. Now, other than these, things happened. If you notice under resources, assets, UIO, lang, I don't have any language file anymore because I started using DataGen for my language file. Many people say that it's useless. However, I think it helps with fixing some problems with the keys. Sometimes there are typos, sometimes you don't know what to put there. In case of our item groups, for example, we are making identifiers, but take note, this translate, that's the section that we are taking care of, is returning a mutable text translate. And if you want to translate this, previously we knew that we would have to put mod id dot blah. In this case, we are getting a text. So I have a helper method, credit goes to Tutivorti, add text, and all it's doing is that it's converting my text to a translatable text content and gets the content, by the way. And after this cast, I can just get the key, and that's the identifier, and I will put the value, and that's it. So if you want to, all it's taking to have a data gen for translations is that you make a class extend fabric language provider, make a constructor, and inside this generate translations, I just rename this translation builder to builder, and then builder.add your entry with your language translation. And one thing, it had something here that I removed, and that's language code. You don't need that. You can produce your own language code like en.us. The default setting for the language file is en_us, but I kept it because who knows what will happen in future. I precisely dedicate this translation to be English translation. It will be uploaded inside repository. The last thing that you need for this to work is that you need to add it as an entry inside your DataGen, and you will have the language provider for your DataGen from now on. However, things are a little bit ugly here, especially if you pay attention down below. And by the way, you can add any item or tags that will work. Now, if you look, these are my item groups, and these are the tooltips that I had on different sections of the code. Now, I had to copy paste them. This is not a good thing, in my opinion. So instead, we can say that, by the way, don't forget, every one of these inline initializations should be moved into our register calls. So to do fix inline initializations. Now, if I want to get rid of this copy pasting, I can say public static. I shouldn't make it final because I want to move things inside registry. Mutable text, and I will call it blocks title. And as I said, I'm not gonna make it inline initialized, although it's nothing really important. It's just a mutable text. So if I want to, for these, I can make them final, but I will not do that. So blocks title, I will come back down. Let me close these. This is bothering me. Okay, inside register, after the log file, I will say block title equals to the translate. And now I can take this guy back all the way up where I see this error because I removed the translation. I will add it there. However, remember, if I keep this section as inline initialization, I can have a null pointer exception because right now, when the class is initialized, the block title is null, and I'm assigning null here. However, because I'm moving this section into the registry after these translatables, then it would work. Another thing that I need to mention is that you see this underline one underline. This is a trick that I found that helps me organize the order of the tabs showing inside the Minecraft. However, you don't need to put them inside translation title. You just need to use them under identifier. But I kept it there because I want to have things consistent. So I know that this is the second tab, this is the sixth tab, and so on and so forth. Now that I have them, instead of this section, that is the key, translate blah, I can say mod item groups dot blocks title. Here is a problem. I'm not calling a register from DataGen. This is a critical point. Because I'm not calling a register from DataGen, I can't initialize them inside register. This is one exception that you should keep this final and you should inline initialize it as it is. Because as I said, when you run the datagen, it's not entering into main. It enters into the datagen itself. Either I have to initialize it both here and register. That's a very bad thing in my opinion. It's janky. You can use it right here. And these are the only things that should be inline initialized. Also, as I said, it's just a mutable text, so it won't touch anything inside the game. Okay, should I keep it like this? If I want to keep it consistent, I may want to produce some private static final strings and use it in both cases like this. What I mean is this private static final, call it block name equals to, oh, I can't use it because I'm using dot here and I'm using underline here, so forget about it. This is an identifier after all, so you don't need it to be consistent with this, but the naming is nice to have this underline one. It's totally up to you. Okay, now that I have this and I'm handling it here, I can do the same thing inside the item groups for each tab, and also I should do the same thing for the rest of the tools, the command. Of course, this command will be replaced at some point in future. It will be recoded. However, the command name and command error should be the same. So I have tuner, the player teleporter. We need to finish that. And the command. I have to use this initialization on those classes and then use them inside this translatable. That's another to do for me. Lots of to-dos. Yes, this is the real life of a mod developer. So to do, use static fields. I had to cover this translation datagen. Let's take a look at what we have left inside registry. Nothing else for the mod items. For item groups, talk about call. Oh yeah, here we go. We have lots of things to cover here. Okay, as you noticed, every time I want to make an icon, I was creating an item stack. However, instead of using new item stack blah, we can call the items dot get default stack. This returns an item stack for us, if you notice. But that's nicer because now I can get rid of this lambda and that will work. And I should use colon and not the direct method call. And that's it. So basically we are calling get default stack, but without using the lambda, and we are getting an item stack back. So if you don't want this lambda here, just remove this section and this parenthesis, colon, get default stack, and that's it. So I have to replace all of these between the episodes. 3 or 4 more left, but that's it. Actually, I can just copy it. Remove this, remove the parenthesis, paste. That's it. So as fast as that, I got rid of one more else. This should work. No, it's a mod block. Elevator dot as item. Then we can call this default stack. On blocks, you have to get the item. The last one is this guy. So again, this is a block, so as item, and then colon, get item stack. And now I can get rid of this icon thing. Then what do we have left with? Oh yeah, wow, this is a big one. Sometimes you have a mod that adds few items, few blocks, and you want to keep all of them inside one single item group, but your own dedicated item group. You have 2 ways. Either you add entries like this, or you can utilize another thing. And I will talk about this and referring to some people on the Discord channel. I will tell you why it's not good to do this inside the item group directly, and I will talk about the proper way of doing it. Now, if you add entries one after another, you have the benefit of setting the orders. For example, you will set the items first and then blocks. That's okay because we can utilize this approach for that. But what if I want to show my gems first, then the tools, then the rest of the items? Or for blocks, I want to show the decorative blocks first, then something else, then something else. Adding them one after another myself gives me the benefit of setting the orders. However, using one of these 2 approaches, I lose that benefit of ordering inside the type, for example, inside items. Now, what is wrong with this? Let's take a look. First of all, it goes into registries, gets the items, and read all the items in the game. Then it makes a stream of it so that it can filter on it, and it will keep only the items that has our mod ID. That's okay. Then it gets the item or an empty, so it's an optional, and then it maps them so that it removes the optional section. Then it adds another filter to filter out the empty optionals, and then predict not means that we can use a blacklist to blacklist those things that we don't want to show. And then finally, we are ending up with a stream that only has our items, and those items are not empty and are not blacklisted. Finally, we loop through them and add them one after another to this item group. Looks okay, isn't it? When I asked if it's okay to do it, Nat optimized this, and it's basically the same thing. Looking inside items in the registry, we get the entry set, we stream through all the items, we filter out only our items, and then we get the values, we collect everything, and then remove those that are blacklisted, and finally we add them to the list. Take note, here we need to use a variable because remove all blacklist needs to work on a variable list of items. Okay, this is what Tutiworthy had done, and this is what Nate provided. Nice, thanks to Nate. However, there is something wrong here, and that's where Zero no Ryoki and B-Side, if I pronounce correctly, produced something, and that's this. Zero said that the item group assignment is called when a group needs to build or being updated. Until now, I thought that, okay, mod item groups are just being called once at game loading. However, Zero indicated that no, it's more than once and it can happen during the game runtime. Now it becomes clear this is not a good approach because each time the item groups need to refresh itself inside the game, we are looping through all the items that are provided in the game. This is not optimized anymore. And this is when B-Side suggested that we can have a static list and add items to these static lists inside our own registry. And then finally, instead of getting this stream, we just read the list because, well, let's face it, we have the list. And we just loop through that list and add the items. What he is saying is that, for example, inside mod items, we can have a public static, it shouldn't be final, list of item, and we call it mod items, and we instantiate it as new array list. Why are you yelling at me? Because it needs to import classes. Now we have these mod items. Each time inside our registry that we are registering a new item, we will have this in here on top. And finally, we can say add reinforced shulker. Of course, it's final right now because I didn't do the code refactor, but here I have mod items, isn't it? If I come back inside item groups, we can say that we have a list of item. We call it temp item equals to mod items dot, and I refactored it all items between the pause. And then I say temp item dot remove all the blacklist. And finally, we can say temp item dot for each entries, add. This way, we are adding our own mod items inside a single item group. However, we are not constantly looking back to find every item in the game to do so. Same thing can be used for blocks. So for example, we have a list of block and it's net Minecraft block. We call it temp block equals to mod blocks dot all blocks temp block dot remove all blacklist. Here I will call it block, and let's refactor this guy to item. Yes, I know. What are you yelling at me? You don't have these. Okay, then we go for each, and here we say entries dot add entries add. And this will work, I think. The only thing remaining is that inside mod blocks on top, we will need a public static list of block, and we call it all blocks, and that's that. Come on, import the class for me. And of course, we need to add our blocks at the very end to the list. So here at the very end, we say dot add, and for example, the very first one was what? Enderite. Now, remember, if we need to somehow convert this and it will yell at us, we need to fix things. Now, blacklist item or blacklist actually was something that I provided on top, okay? And I will duplicate it and make it blacklist block. And these two, again, need to be initialized at the start of registry. We will add the things that we don't want to show into the item groups. For example, for the blocks, I know that I want to add mod blocks dot air bomb group. whatever it is, you will see in future. So I want to add it inside the blacklist block. And as you see, this should work. So I will comment this whole section because personally, I prefer to use the manual addition of anything that I want, but I will keep them as a comment because, as I said, in future, we may want to handle things differently, and I will keep them as a comment for the temp mods that I will generate. So I will comment this guy, and I will comment this guy. This is a much better way if you want to be lazy and add everything inside the item group. This is a much better way to have it. If you so want to, you can use this method inside the registry call of your mod items at the very end. This, of course, you don't need that part, you don't need that part. This will help. At the very least, this will help. And why are you yelling at me now? Import class, map from Java utils. Yes, mod ID, import static, collectors. What is the import the class? Come on. Okay. So because we are calling the register from mod init, at least now we are sure that this will be called once, and it will collect all the items inside our mod item. So if I uncomment this, I will take it here down below, and instead of items, I will assign this. And that yelling at me is gone. And of course, I can now remove this initialization because I'm sure that either it should be null or it should register something. So this, if you want to be very lazy, this is the laziest approach that you should take. So you shouldn't call this code from the items group, but instead from your registry of your blocks. So blocks and items, by the way, all blocks. Now, instead of item, we simply go for block. And I just need to uncomment the top. Honestly, I don't see any benefit of keeping every block inside the list other than this one single use case. But I will keep it as it is without commenting them, because who knows, maybe in future, at some point, there is a use case that we can really use this list for whatever reason we want to. Now, of course, we can get rid of this, and I will keep this code as a commented one, not here, but on the first one on top, because this is a lazy way and I want to keep them there. And of course, the blacklist now being commented. Unfortunately, for blacklist, you have to put the entries one after another yourself. However, considering that there are very few blocks that you may want to blacklist, that's okay. So that's that. What else do we have? Inline example of adding something to blacklist. I did remove that. Okay, we did use overload. Oh no, that's the new one. Okay, in future we will talk about block entities, but remember, we can register our block entities with a generic type here too. But instead, you can just simply use that. And of course, now we have raw usage, but that's the generic one. I will produce another way that doesn't use generics, okay? And you will see. However, this may be the only time that using generics may help. We will come back to this one later. Other than that, we have one extra thing that I want to talk about. And this video is getting long, I know, but this is a whole code refactoring, so I want to deal with that in one go. Now, if I run my client, and as soon as the run starts, I will stop the client. Actually, I'm waiting for the very first few messages on the build. Now, this last part had bothered me for a very, very long time. You are using unsafe operation, recompile using this argument. It had two sections. First of all, I didn't know how to use the argument, and I didn't understand where was the code unsafe. For using the argument, you go into build.gradle and use this flag under tasks.with-type Java compile. After you are version 21, you add these two lines. Options, compiler args, the same argument that he is telling you, and then duplication to true. Now, if I run the game now, it will give me some problematic error-like clarifications. Let's take a look. Here we go. If we take a look at this, now he's directing me toward the places that the call was unsafe. And I was like, what the hell? Why is it there so many? But then I took a look, mod loot table provider, mod armor item. Let's see, mod loot table provider. Now, the thing is that this has nothing to do with unsafe calls until we scroll down and we find this create or drops. This was a method call that we copy pasted from vanilla. And I was like, what the hell? Why would vanilla code be unsafe? So I went into Discord channel, I asked people around, and apparently these two casts are being added by compiler when it's trying to deobfuscate the code. In other words, in the Minecraft itself, we don't have these two casts inside the real code, thanks to Nate to indicate these. So if I remove these two typecasts, one there and one is here, the whole code should compile without a problem, and I will get one less error message at least, or maybe a whole lot less compared to what we had. Because remember, lots of them were just calling this method to add our or drop. And as you see, we don't get anyone for the loot table provider anymore. However, we have one more here, and that is for mod armor item. And that it says unchecked call to add as a member of the raw type array list. Templates.add, and it's in line 106. Let's take a look. Oh yeah, it's indicating it already here. Unchecked call to it as a member of raw type this. Okay, this one, array temp.add. What if I say equals to new array list? Will it solve anything? I don't think so. The reason is that the array list is a generic type. So we are calling it raw. We are not providing anything to it. Now, new effect is a status effect instance. What if we say that it's array list of status effect instances, and there we go. Everything is gone. And if I run it now, I think that we won't get any more problems here. No, we have few. Okay, stop. Let's take a look. Now it's another line. It's not the same lines anymore, I think. Okay, we are adding to, what's the thing again? Warning, unchecked call to enum map class K, because this is returning a generic type again. And unfortunately, alt-inter is useless in these cases. Unchecked assignment. Well, that was not a problem. Here is the problem. In a map, we are calling it raw. Sorry, my phone called and I forgot to hit the record button, but nothing big happened. The thing is that we were calling this in a map raw. So just put these two markers and it will solve that problem. Between the stopping of the record and remembering that I had to hit the record button, I just added another package on the registry called miscellaneous, and I added some of the method calls that we had in the mod registries inside here. Basically, I made each one dedicated to its own class and register method call. This gives me a big flexibility when it comes to calling these register methods, because before now we had these register calls in any order that we would like them. With our new refactored code, it's really important what should be called and what is the order of things that we call one after another. For example, if I want to add something inside block entities, I should register my block entities after the blocks. Same goes for the recipes. Custom recipes for the block entities should happen before the block entity, at least logical wise. For example, item groups should happen after the items and block registration. In previous code that we had with inline initialization, it didn't matter, because if we had this mod item groups.register on top of the method, it would call the mod items, and the moment it would call mod items, all these public static fields were being initialized directly in that first call. So if item groups register was on top, it wouldn't bother anyone. However, with our refactored code right now, each and every one of these items are being unassigned, and in practice they are null. So when we come back and add items into item groups on the register, if we do it before calling the register for items or blocks, we are basically assigning an item that has null value, and we are opening the door to null point exceptions. Long story short, we should make sure that now each and every one of the calls are happening in the order that we want them to. Events are the only exception. I want to call the events right on top before anything else. However, as you see, I move things around. I'm registering recipes after the mod items and mod blocks. I'm assigning the item groups after these two. Same for block entities, and the screen handlers should happen after block entities. Word generation, then portals, then strippables, then attributes, compostables, effects, flammables, fuels, oxidizables, potion recipes, trades, finally mod commands, and at the very end, the server-side mod messages. Now, the only thing that I didn't call from here is model predicate provider, and we will come back to that later. Also, if you ever had any problem, for example, a null point exception, on the registering, basically on mod loading time, come back and take a look at these orders, or maybe what you had done as an extra. Chances are that there are things that you need to move around for a proper order of operations. We will continue with the events in the next video because we have things to cover yet, and we will see two different classes that can get benefit from events. If you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on that bell so that when I publish a new video, you will get informed. Have fun, everyone. Bye.